Okay, this is Mike Benoit here, and this little old control center doesn't work the way I want it to work on some things. So I wanted to show the image here of um, Larken Rose, but I'm not doing it because I wanted to, okay, I have to do this and then I have to close it off and then, okay. So this is going to be a critique of Larken Rose's presentation regarding 5 stupid complaints about freedom. And I don't even know who the guy's name is, Steve Shives or something. I really don't have any idea what Steve Shives says. I have no intention of defending him. Probably I would disagree with him as much as I disagree with Mr. Larken Rose here. Uh, so we'll start this off and we'll let Larken speak, and then I'll rebut what he's saying.
They respond to them on an individual basis because there's kind of an infinite number of people out there advocating the enslavement of mankind, also known as government. But somebody said, hey, you should do a response to Steve Shives' video. And I said, who the heck is that? And I went and looked it up and thought, I actually will do a specific response to this just because Mr. Shives
okay, I'm going to replay that, and I really don't know how loud this is going to come across. It may be too loud, but we'll just see, and if it is too loud, we'll just live with it. So I'm going to replay what he said here, make a comment.
Also known as government. But somebody said, hey, you should do a response to Steve Shives' video. And I said, who the heck is that? And I went and looked it up and thought, I actually will do a specific response to this just because Mr. Shives very succinctly expresses several of the most common, completely bogus, irrational complaints about freedom, about anarchism and voluntarism. So he wrote an article called 5 Stupid Things About Libertarians, or 5 Reasons Why Libertarians Are Stupid. I already forgot the title. But it was insulting and it was about libertarians. Now, he doesn't distinguish between politically active, like capital L libertarians, and just the general principle, but that's okay. So I'm going to address his 5 points. I'm not going to address them in the order he did them. I'll address them in reverse order of how important they are. The first is, he was saying, well, libertarianism is anachronistic. The people who believe in that, they just want to roll things back to the old days. I don't have much of a rebuttal for that because it isn't actually an argument. It's like saying, well, yeah, 2 + 2 equals
well, actually, I didn't
4
go back far enough,
years
so
ago, enslavement of mankind, also known as government. But somebody advocate freedom.
Here we go.
And I don't normally respond to them on an individual basis because there's kind of an infinite number of people out there advocating the enslavement of mankind, also known as government. But somebody said, hey, you should do a response to Steve Shives' video. And I said, who the heck is that? And I went and looked it up and thought...
Okay, actually, I should comment on that, because there he is, he's going off, and he's... Guys, that anybody that advocates any kind of government is advocating the enslavement of mankind. Now, you know, this reminds me of a guy that's got a lawnmower, and the lawnmower gets out of control, and he loses control of the lawnmower, and he cuts his toe off with it, and he's saying lawnmowers are now bad. That anybody that advocates lawnmowers are just evil, bad, because lawnmowers do evil, bad things. You know, and his definition of government, who knows what his definition of government is, but he certainly thinks that Benjamin Franklin and John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine represent the same kind of thought that Stalin, Hitler, or Mao Zedong represented. And really, you know, he's got quite a big rant here, and I guess I'm going to have a rant and rebuttal. But I sure would like to tell him to get over it, because Larken Rose, I want to tell you something right now. This is, your choice isn't no government, okay? The choice is government by consent or government by tyranny. There is no government. And you might say, well, I want no government. Well, I'm sorry, it's a natural occurring thing. That's saying, like, I want to live without food. I don't. I'm in prison to eat. and that's tyranny against me. That's enslavement of my body. That's forcing me to eat and rack. Government is as natural a thing as could possibly be. You've got government with every relationship you have. There's two people in communication are governing each other. Now, I know you're awful confused between the difference of government or the state. So someday I hope you can figure that out, where government ends and the state picks up. I'm not quite sure. I do know that the totalitarian state references a system of government that is operating off of 100% tyranny and no percent consent. Now, if people get together and they have a political area and they say, well, we're going to, let's say, we're going to elect folks to this particular area to, keep charge of different things like make sure the perimeter defenses are taken care of, etc., post guards, and do things to make sure the other tribe doesn't come over here. That's a government, and that's a government by consent. And those people aren't off trying to enslave their fellows. Okay, so let's see what you got to say, and we'll go on from that.
I actually will do a specific response to this, just because Mr. Shives.
Okay, so what he actually does is doesn't have any much contention with, Mr. Shives' issue 1. So let's move forward a little bit.
The people who believe in that, they just want to roll things back to the old days.
Yeah,
they sound like pompous. And again, this isn't an argument. Like, someone can be right and sound pompous, or they can be you think you're better than other people. I don't advocate the initiation of violence against anybody else. And yes, I do believe that makes me better than other people.
Okay, he says he doesn't advocate the initiation of violence against anybody else, so that makes him better. Now, and then somehow he thinks that someone that wants a minimal government, again, like Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry or John Adams, somebody that wants a minimal government, yes, they're advocating the initiation of force. Well, I'm sorry, Larken, you got it wrong. They never, and you look at the Constitution and look at the original intentions, it wasn't the advocation of the initiation of force, okay? It was a system that was set up for the use of retaliatory force. Now, because people took advantage of that and abused that system, doesn't mean that the tool was no good. I mean, that's to argue that the gun's no good because people use it for bad purposes. And again, get over it, because your choices are not no government. If you want that kind of absolute, you're going to have to enforce your collectivism on anybody that wants some government. So let's say you got 10% of the people want some small government, and you got 3% of the people want tyranny, and you got 80-some% that don't care, and then you got your 5% that don't want any government, like Larken Rose. Well, guess what? In that mix, what are you going to end up with? Well, you probably end up with tyranny, because everybody else is going to be apathetic, and they're just going to let tyranny win.
Now, I used to be a statist. I used to think it's okay to advocate violence if you do it by way of the legal process and politics and voting and authority in government and all that. So I'm not necessarily...
I like the way he says he used to be a statist, because, and probably when he used to be a statist, he was advocating the retaliatory force that was used to defend life, liberty, and property. And now he's better. He's not a statist anymore. He's just somebody who thinks you can have no government. And again, it's so ridiculous. You got government at all kinds of levels with you and your friend. People get together and they have a little club. And in that club, they elect the chairman for that monthly meeting. Well, that chairman, and with their little sergeant of arms, that's their government. Okay? And that's government by consent, and it's not people that are, and they might even have fees that they pay and they have agreed to pay. Okay? So now he'll take it down 100 years later, and the grandchildren are kind of into the little group there, but they don't want to pay fees. So I didn't consent to these fees. Just ridiculous, childish. let's go.
Necessarily saying I have better intentions, but now that I have outgrown that particular lie that I grew up with.
Yeah, I like how you outgrew that lie. Like you outgrew the lie of your 861 argument on the tax nonsense. There's no law in the Internal Revenue Code that imposes a tax on anybody, but you're teaching people about this 861 thing that is a way for the taxpayer to determine its tax liability. And a taxpayer is someone who's subject to or liable for an Internal Revenue Code tax. And you sold that snake oil to a lot of folks when the bottom line is you're trying to, and what happens when you throw that out there? All the government has to do is convince people that's a bogus argument, and the default argument is you owe income tax. So you know what? You're thinking you're so self-righteous now, you're against tyranny. You're just helping tyranny in that cause, and you're helping it again.
My behavior is more moral than the vast majority of people on the planet.
Yeah, well, it's not moral to sit back and let tyranny and government and all these governments turn the whole planet into a plantation when you're sitting around arguing that no one should ever use force against somebody else. Well, yeah, they shouldn't, okay? But they will, and governments will. So we, the logical thinking people, decide to form governments to deal with those people who will use force, or those nations who will use force against us. But you're more moral because you're not going to participate in that. So you're so moral, you're just letting the tyrants win. That's how moral you are.
Because the vast majority of people still believe in government, and by way of government, they still advocate the enslavement of their fellow man.
Yeah, no. You're the one that advocates the enslavement of your fellow man by not advocating for a government that will deal with those who enslave their fellows, deal with those who rob their fellows, deal with those who steal people's life, liberty, and property, deal with people who rape people, deal with people who violate other people. You don't advocate dealing with that because you think having a government to do that, that's as bad as having Joseph Stalin there.
The extortion and violent domination of people who haven't threatened or harmed anyone. So yes, there is such thing as people who are morally superior and people who are morally inferior, at least in their behaviors.
Yeah, well, you're not one of those, okay, morally superior. Your behavior is stand by and let the tyrants murder people. Have you done anything to go down and stand in front of a courthouse and pass out fully informed jury association flyers to tell folks that they don't have to convict? Oh no, that would be participating in the system. You would be enslaving people because you're participating in the system. You don't want to go out there and tell people that they can sit in the jury box and tell the government on these tyrannical laws to go pound sand. No, you're morally superior to that.
And to say otherwise, like I wonder if Mr. Shives, if he went back in time and could meet some slave owners, would say, I'm not saying I'm better than you because I don't own other human beings. It's just, your opinion is equally valid. No, it isn't. The opinion that it's okay to stomp on the self-ownership of other individuals is not equally valid to the opinion that you shouldn't do that you should leave people in freedom. Number 3, and this is about the most common one, libertarianism is naive to think that people left to their own devices will be good, and like a lot of people do, Mr. Shives assumes that people who are libertarians, or in my case anarchist, or whatever you want to call it, think that we don't need a government because everybody will be good without one. That's not at all the logic. That's not at all the reasoning. I don't even know anybody who actually believes that.
No, your logic, Larken Rose, is that your government will be private agencies. There'll be all these different private agencies. Instead of calling them government, there'll be private agencies, and you think that instead of having a central force to check those people who violate other people, like in a geographical area, you'll have competition agencies, and people will just voluntarily pay their fees to these things, and they'll all work themselves out, and they won't end up being gangs that will take advantage of the ratepayers and start extorting money from them. No, and you won't call that a government. No. And there'll be how many people will sign up and how many people won't sign up, and then how workable that will be, and then how much of a impossibility that would be, because government there'll be government there. It ain't going to be the kind you like. You don't eliminate government. It's a natural occurring thing. The sun governs you. Take your little pale face out in the sun for too long, it'll govern you. It'll govern you, tell you not to do that again. Yes, sir.
However good or bad people are, and I've said this a billion times, but I'll say it again. However good or bad people are, it doesn't improve the situation to take some of those people and give them societal permission to violently dominate everybody else. And that's what government is.
Well, I'm sorry, that is not what government is. All right, I'm just giving you a lot. They don't have permission to violently dominate everybody else. Again, what if you have the self-government? You have people governing each other in a communication cycle. You have families that are governing in the family. You have churches, they have government within their churches. You have condominium associations that have government in there. And then you have all these governments by consent. Now, if you let anybody become tyrannical in that process, then you got your complaint. But that complaint doesn't mean all government is about people who want to dominate and force other people. When you let it get perverted, yeah. So that's the kind of government you want, you're actually supporting, when you let the tyrants win.
And to think that that's going to serve as a check against the imperfections of humanity, because yes, lots of people are negligent or malicious or untrustworthy or whatever, but and you see the religious nature of the belief in government, which I'll get to at the end of this video, in the fact that people say, I don't trust people, so we need government to keep people in line, which sort of implies that government is something else. Like it's some weird, mystical, magical thing. Even though if you ask people, well, what runs government? Well, people. Well, what?
Well, you know, Larken, there's another opinion there. It's the people. There are people that have the opinion that I don't trust people. No, I trust 98% of the people. I trust 90% of the people on some issues. On other issues, I trust 50% of the people. You know, it depends on the circumstance. You know. If someone's hungry and starving to death, I don't trust him not to take food out of the refrigerator at my house. In fact, I trust him to do it. Okay? So, and it's not about a matter of putting people in charge of a government system to deal with those people that violate somebody else. It's not that we don't trust people, so we're going to put people in charge of me. It's we know some people will violate other people, and so we're going to have a system or mechanism to deal with them. All right? Get it?
People, politicians. Well, are they wiser and more noble and caring than the rest of us? Well, no, they're usually a bunch of lying crooks. Okay, so we don't trust human beings, so what we should do is take some of the worst human beings among us and put them in a position of power where they can violently dominate everybody else, because that will fix everything. That's one of the main arguments.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the main argument, and that's what you got, because you got a system that's so perverted. You've got a government that's perverted law into an instrument of plundering our life, liberty, and property, and that people that are elected to go in there, even if they think they're good people, they actually think that that's actually what they're supposed to do, is write legislation that actually, you know, it might be under the guise of protecting us, life, liberty, and property, but it's actually working at the plundering of us, plundering our life, liberty, and property. And that's the system we got. And why do we have that system? Because it's a scenario I put out earlier. It's because we've let them pervert the system. We let government get out of control. We lost control, and we lost control because we were lazy and indolent. And the answer is not to say, oh, I'm running for no government now. You're not going to get it. Get it? The choices are not no government. It's some kind of government. That's the choice.
For statism, and it's totally loony. And so, but Mr. Shives makes the same mistake. You must trust everybody if you don't want government, and speaks of government as this magical, you know, superhuman, all-powerful good guy.
Enough on that one.
Will be unaccountable. They could get away with doing anything. But when's the last time you read a newspaper? The people in government who have the most wealth and the most power get away literally with mass murder. Who are they accountable to? Well, in a few years we can vote for their identical twin, and he may or may not win, and the exact same thing will happen anyway.
See, what you're arguing, again, against a totalitarian state, and that people supporting this totalitarian state are just the same as people that support a system or any kind of form of government, like I talked about earlier, as being the same kind of people. I mean, this is such a collectivism to the max, and it's like absolutism. You know, no government, or your argument is absolutism. It's tyrannical. Government is tyrannical. No government is the opposite of tyrannical. Any government is tyrannical.
Anyway, again, this is just wishful thinking among statists, hoping that government will be better than normal people, despite thousands and thousands of years of evidence to the contrary. That if you leave people in.
Okay, so those people who think that good can be done through government, those people that have that idea, like Social Security and welfare and all these other acts of aggression. Yeah, they think that people won't do the right thing individually, so we're going to have government do it. Well, you see, those are straw man arguments for someone who is a libertarian. An anarchist, if I accomplish anything, I'd like it to be the anarchists just go off and be anarchists and quit claiming libertarianism, because libertarianism is a limited philosophy of government, a government that's restricted and restrained to securing our rights as declared in the Declaration of Independence, and not a government that does the opposite and perverts law into an instrument of plunder. So he's making that anybody that wants to support government is supporting a government that is engaging on all these, as Jan Halfield uses, predations.
Freedom, some people will get really powerful and dominate others. Yeah, that's called government. And the idea that we can't do away with government because what will happen will be.
Some people will get real powerful and dominate others, and that's called government. Well, where is this? Is that the way it is in the church government that I talked about? Is that the way it is in a corporation government? I guess people in charge will dominate. So that's why you got to keep firing them. Once upon a time, the old Roman system, the people in charge were two people. They were called councils, and they were in charge for 1 year. And they couldn't do anything unless they both agreed. That's a good check and balance. But of course, they let that good system go after a period of time.
Government, basically. The worst case scenario that most statists come up with to predict the horrible consequences of not having a government is a perfect description of government. So, like, the worst case scenario is if we do away with government, we'll end up with government. Yeah, I agree. That's as bad as you can get. But no, we wouldn't. If people didn't imagine legitimacy to violent domination, people wouldn't put up with it.
If people didn't like ice cream, they wouldn't eat it. And legitimacy to violent domination. You see, again, that's all government is to him. So if he's governing his children, that's just violent domination.
I've said this a million times. There's only one gang in the world with the ability to forcibly or to dominate 100 million armed Americans, and that's the gang that's duped those 100 million armed Americans into imagining an obligation to obey by making them believe in this superstition called authority. So they put up with it because they believe that the mythology that apparently Mr. Shives believes.
Okay, so you know what? He's correct in this point, except he's putting it like in the wrong pie. Okay, this idea that you should believe authority, and of course that's what anarchists want with their cult following, is they want you to believe in authority. Them, they know they got the answer. And you should obey authority, and they do. I mean, the tyrants do have it laid out like that, in the sense that, here's the law, and, until the laws change, you need to obey the law. And of course, I argue with the minimal government guys all the time on that nonsense. Abraham Lincoln was a great tyrant in that regard. It's the law, you got to enforce it. If it's not the law, you can't do it. I remember in a legislature session, whatever, he was chastising the guys for trying to call the bank in to lay out their books and records. And he told them, last year I proposed legislation that would give us the authority to do that. And you guys voted it down. So now we don't have the authority to do it. Excuse me? They would have the authority if they just agreed to legislation prior to that. So and they think if we stamp and call a law, all of a sudden it's authority. And people that believe in that, that is the mistake. But it's a double mistake to take it further and say governments and all these people and the system's all screwed up because all these people in power, they're convinced that if it's a law, people have to obey it. And the people are convinced that if it's a law, a written law, that they have to obey it. And so that's definitely a problem. But that's not a problem that presents anarchy as a solution. That's a problem that presents, that's BS. And we ought to end that BS as a solution.
About representatives they represent us, and there's consent of the governed and all the garbage to try to hide the fact that, no, there's a ruling class, and it violently dominates and robs everybody else. That's the reality, and that doesn't make us safer. It doesn't make us more civilized or anything else.
Yeah, and that's because we let them become tyrants. It's as simple as how many times, for how long have people refused to sit on a jury? For how long have people refused to actually, obey, not obey, or not disobey? They refuse to not disobey. Refuse to disobey, not disobey. Too many negatives. Refuse to disobey tyrannical law. What's a tyrannical law? Any law that violates life, liberty, or property. The right to life, liberty, or property is a tyrannical law. Now, even in the Constitution, when they had the violation of property, the eminent domain clause, if they knew that governments will have occasions to do that, so a provision was put in there. They're not going to say don't do it because they know they're going to do it. Is to make the person whole, the people that benefit. If the general public benefit, then the person who lost their property, they need to be made whole by the general public. But this evil character that he's putting on, and actually that evil character is just being put on everybody else. It's not an evil character. It's a gross mistake.
So the idea that without a giant violent ruling class, there would be powerful people we couldn't control. Holy smokes, open a history book. Number 4, he opines that, this libertarianism alienates people from the government. Oh dear, we have to be involved because the government is us, and more of the same bogus mythology. It's sort of like saying, come on.
Well, you know what? This guy's half right. And, again, this guy's referring, and this is the problem with the libertarian movement, is guys like Larken Rose here, is that, he's trying to label anarchism as libertarianism. And so we got, we're losing people, we're losing warriors to the anarchy bench. They sit on the bench. And people on the other side are thinking of libertarians as anarchists and going, the guys are nuts. And they are nuts because they want to, in the sense they want to deny nature. Now, that's okay. Go ahead and get mad. You can believe Larken Rose or whatever you want. But, just hopefully you look at this and do some analyzing and not be in the cult of Rose or Molyneux or any of these guys. And so libertarianism is not anarchy. And because we're not involved with the government, it's the amazing thing. Anarchists have no regard for the Constitution. And that's the same thing with the tyrants. They have no regard for it either. And we got tyrants in there. And we had why did we end up with one Ron Paul? It's because people that understood liberty and the principles of inalienable rights and the principles that laws need to be written to secure rights, not to violate them. Now people are so far down the pike they don't have a clue. You know, they want laws against GMO. They want all products mandatory labeling of all products GMO. Well, the GMO, because these GMO people are so bad. Yeah, they're doing terrible, bad things. Well, listen. So if I want to buy a product, I don't care. It's GMO and somebody wants to sell it and they don't want to label it. You think you can take freedom away and somehow you're going to be better off. That's the argument Larken Rose should be arguing against. Those people who are advocating that stuff. And yes, we need to be involved, take our country back by educating people into an understanding, not all government is evil, da da da. You know, talk about if it's not an illusion for anarchy to ever exist, it's an illusion, delusion to believe that in the minds of people that government will never exist or could never exist. Those aren't your choices.
If we say the carjacker is bad, the good people might stop voting for a carjacker. They might not be friends with the carjacker. Government is the enemy of the people. It is a parasite. It is a violent, dominating, inhuman, immoral beast.
It's all of those things, Larken Rose, because you let it get that way. Because you didn't keep it in its box. What did Washington say about government? It's like fire. It's what's it? It's a dangerous, fearful mistress and dangerous servant or something. You let it get out of control, it'll burn you down. So that's not to say it's not useful, and people will create a government. So you want this absolutism that what's the collectivism of no government? That's not your choices. There's going to be some kind of government
that constantly initiates violence against all the productive people. And this idea that, oh, let's be buddies, we don't want to be alienated.
Okay, so government is not supposed to be felt until you violated somebody else. That's when you feel it.
From that thing, yes, I do. I absolutely want to be alienated from that thing as far as possible away from it. So it just sort of feeds into the thing that the government is us, which is, you hear all the time, it's just so ridiculous that anybody believes that. Like, you know that it gives commands. It says, you're going to give us this much money. We're going to call it taxes. You're going to do this. You're not going to do that. If you disobey any of our commands or laws.
Sure, because you let it become the master. You let the servant become the master. And it's because you didn't stop it. And the movement to stop it is that we don't obey these tyrannical laws. But to say, you know, and this, I don't want to use the stupid saying, throw the baby out with the bathwater, but the thing is, if something is not working as it was designed to do, then find out why not. You don't throw it away, and you fix it so it does what it's designed to do. This government, and it's in the Declaration of Independence, I guess Jefferson knew. He said when a government became destructive of these ends, it was up to the people to throw off the government and establish new safeguards for their future security and safety. So that's enough for this. I'm not going to change Larken Rose. Got his delusional idea that his anarchy could ever exist. This hatred of government. He wants to label guys like Ron Paul or me who would like to see our government reduced to the size where it is a servant and not a master, and where it does only deal with those people who have violated other people, and be there as a mechanism to deal with nations that are about to violate our borders, but not to go around violating borders. So he wants to conflate Joseph Stalin with Thomas Jefferson. well, let him. But if you folks are going to be in his cult, that's too bad. I'll do a few of these. Other people will do them until you can see it is cultism. It's an irrational behavior, and it's definitely delusional because it'll never occur. You're not going to have a world without air, a world without sun, a world without water, nor will you have one without government. Nature governs nature. Nature governs um, us and all the animals and plants within, and we govern one another. And government is a naturally occurring thing. It will not be gone. And sure, it can get perverted and get violent, just like nature can do that. And when it does, you have to deal with it and restore it. So that's it. Thank you for listening.